So we're finally here. As promised, I said that I'd go through the journal using a step-by-step guide to give some additional guidance to everybody that actually have the journal. So today is our first live where we're actually going to dig into the journal. And today we're going to be talking about womb mapping, which is the actual first part of the journal. So for everybody that's actually had an opportunity to order their journal and you have your copy already, definitely grab your journal because this is exactly what this live is for. If you have not ordered a copy of the journal, if you have not had an opportunity to do so, you can still do so. The journal is back in stock here on TikTok. There should be a link on the page here somewhere. Or you can just go back to my page, tap on one of the videos and follow the link there. But again, as I promised, this is going to be our first live on the step-by-step guide in working through the shadow work journal. Jules, welcome. I'm so glad to see you. Glad that you got your journal. A lot of people have not received theirs yet, but a good amount of the people, at least that ordered through my link, have. And as I promised, this is going to be our first live where we're going to get into it. So if you have your journal as you're checking in, definitely let me know if you do. If you don't have your journal, you can still follow this introduction with us. L'Oreal, welcome. Thank you for being here. Absolutely. I'm excited. I'm excited to facilitate. I've been excited to actually go through the journal myself. I've been excited to walk through a lot of the activities. And yes, some of these activities can be really challenging. But part of what I'm going to do today is really just talk about how to prepare for the activities and then dig into some of the reflection questions. I will admit that as I was working through the journal, some of the activities may not be applicable to everybody, and that's fine. If the fill in the blank activity is not applicable to you, don't force yourself to actually do the activity, right? Just be honest and be transparent, because working through your shadow work journal is all about you, right? It's your journal. It's about your journey on your healing process. It's not about anybody else. It's not about forcing yourself to be a part of whatever the activity is, but only work through the activities that are actually relevant to you. So I am going to need some moderators to help to moderate any type of activity that's in the comments that's actually a distraction to what we're here to do. So anybody that's checking in, especially if you follow me for quite some time, if you're interested in being a moderator, please do let me know. Becky, I don't know if you're here, but I'm definitely going to need you to stay on top of this one, because I believe that not only is this an important conversation, but I want to make sure that we're not distracted by any type of activities in the comment section. But again, as I promised, this is our first live where I love it. As always, you're right on time. You're spot on. Thank you for being here. I always appreciate you, sis. But yeah, so this is going to be our first walk through the journal. What I've decided to do is, instead of actually having us fill out the journal or work through the journal while we're live, I think it'll be better to really do the preparation material, right? To kind of talk about, absolutely, Queen J-Lo, I got you. To talk about prepping for the activity first. And then what I would suggest is, after we go through this prep stage, then you should take some time to actually work through that section of the journal. Because again, as I work through the journal, I realized that some of the activities needed a little bit more of some insight on exactly what you should be looking for and what you should be trying to do. So that's what I'm going to provide, right? I think we'll do some preparation about the activity, why the activity is important. But what I'm also going to highlight and focus on are the reflection questions, because I believe if you have a good understanding of the reflection questions, it can really be beneficial to the notes that you add. And I realize that if you haven't worked through this journal, or if you haven't been doing this work for quite some time, you may not have the answers to some of the reflection questions, because it's asking you to say what you can do to be better based on the fill in the blank activity. But if you don't have that insight, and if you haven't worked through the journal, you may not have the answer to that. So I'm going to focus on the reflection questions and give you some tools that you may be able to apply as you work through the activities. I'm getting a whole bunch of invitations for people to join, to go live with them. So if I stop to tap on the screen, that's what I'm doing. So As we wait for a few more people to get in here, for everybody that's here, if you have your journal, definitely grab your journal. The part of the journal that we'll be covering today is section 2. I'm not going to flip the screen, so this is going to look backwards when I hold it up. But if you have your journal, it should make sense to you. So we're going to be covering section 2, which is the first shadow work activity. And that activity is wound mapping. And the objective is wound mapping is really to try to figure out the root of what has caused you that pain, that trauma that is impacting your behavior, that is impacting your responses, that is impacting the way that you perceive yourself or the way that you're treating other people. So we're gonna dig into that first. And once we talk about the wound mapping activities and how to kind of identify what it is that has impacted you, I'm going to speak about if, in fact, your wound did not start at childhood. Because what a lot of us are going to find is we may have had a great upbringing, but at some point, some relationship in our life caused us this trauma that is now impacting our behavior that is not in our long-term best interest. So I'm going to talk about what the book is focused on or what the journal is focused on first, which is essentially kind of that childhood wound. But then I'm also going to highlight something that is not in the book, which is how to identify your wounds, even if it's not rooted in your childhood. So again, thank you to everybody that ordered the journal. If you have your journal, awesome. Follow along through your journal because the reflection questions, I think the parts that I'm going to highlight on the reflection questions are going to be very beneficial to you to really help you find those answers and give you those tools. If you don't have your journal, still follow along, tag along, take some notes. If you're waiting for your journal to actually come in, same thing. Follow along, take some notes so that when you receive your journal, you'll have some of those tools that I'll be giving based on the reflection questions. If you have not ordered your journal and you're interested and you don't know what we're talking about, you can go to one of my previous videos, or there may be a link on the page for you all somewhere that will show you how you can get yourself the journal. But again, thank everybody for being in here. This is really all about the shadow work journal and giving you some tools to use as you go through the step-by-step guide. Shadow work can be extremely challenging at times. So one of the things that I want to do first is share with you a breathing activity that I use to ground before and after. So what is the importance of grounding? And I talked about that in one of my previous videos. Click the shopping cart in the bottom left corner to order your journal. On point. Always on point. Thank you, Becky. I appreciate it. So one of the things that I talked about in one of my previous videos is grounding and compassion. The reason why grounding is important before and after you do shadow work is because you can go to some really emotionally heightened states when you're doing your shadow work. And before you get into your shadow work, you really want to ground yourself and make sure you're at a space where you're at peace, you're calm, you're comfortable, and you can actually flow through the process without a lot of other thoughts and a lot of the other things that have impacted you leading up to the point where you're ready to get into your shadow work. So I'm going to stand up to show you guys how to do this breathing activities and how to focus and get it right. I learned this activity when I was actually practicing Tai Chi, and it's worked for me. It's helped me to ground. It's helped me to really get myself centered. So a lot of times people will talk to you about breathing and they say just inhale and exhale. That's what you're supposed to do. But as you're breathing, there's a certain place that you want to focus to make sure that the air that you're breathing in is going to, right? So on the very bottom of your abdomen, right here, right below, I'd say your navel and right above where, like right around here on your waist, when you inhale, you want to make sure that the air that you're inhaling is going into here. So a lot of times when you do breathing activities, you'll notice that people's chest pump up, right? When you're actually breathing in the form of grounding yourself, it shouldn't be your chest that rises first. It should be your abdomen, right? And you want to focus as you inhale to make sure that the air is going right into this area. So if you watch me, you'll watch that it's my abdomen that will rise first before my chest does. And I'm focusing on making sure that that air is going right here. If you do any type of chakra work, you'll know that that's actually a chakra area within your body. So before you start your shadow work, I recommend strongly that you do a breathing activity. As you're doing that breathing activity, you want to focus on making sure that you're pulling that air into your stomach area. Specifically, mentally, you want to focus on that air going into the area right above where your private area or your pubic hair starts to grow and well below your navel. That's where you want to pull that air into. Once you pull that air into that area, your chest will rise, but your chest should rise after your stomach inflates, because you really want to pull that air deep down into your abdomen, into your stomach area, into that chakra area that I showed you. And you want to hold it there for just a second and then slowly exhale. So as a part of this series, as a part of these lives, we're always going to do that activity first. And I will recommend when you're done with your shadow work, you want to do that activity afterwards. If you have any other grounding activities that you know of, that you're aware of, that you do on your personal time that works for you, do so. If you practice yoga or anything like that, any type of activity that helps you to ground, if you have an opportunity, Majestic, welcome, how are you? If you have an opportunity to do this outside, I would recommend you do so. If you have a backyard where you can be around nature, where you can be around fresh air, I would suggest that you do your shadow work there. But I will always recommend that you do your shadow work in private. And that's why my objective in doing the step-by-step guide with you all is not for us to do the actual activities together, but I'm going to give you some perspective into each activity, and then I'm going to give you some tools into the reflection part so that you have some idea on how to give yourself the answers that the reflection questions are asking you. Queen Jayla says she's sitting in the grass while barefoot. Oh, sitting in the grass barefoot helps you. Absolutely. In fact, that's how I choose to do my meditation, right? There's an area close to my home where it's fresh grass, no dogs or anything are usually there. So I go there barefooted and I sit there. That's where I really do my breathing activities. But even if I'm doing shadow work at home, or if I'm doing any type of spiritual guides at home, I try to do that breathing activity first. Again, I'll kind of show you all again, just in case you missed it. As you're breathing, you want your stomach to inflate first, not your chest. So when you pull that air in, you want to make sure you're pulling that air right into this area on your waist. Hold it for just a second. And as you're exhaling, you want to pull your stomach in to make sure you're pushing all that air out. So as you pull in, push it all the way out. Your stomach should be as far inverted as possible when you're pushing out. That's the activity that I do for grounding, along with some other activities, but that's the one that I think we'll do as we go into these step-by-step guides, just to make sure that we're all grounded. 333. There's plenty more. You called that. Good catch. And I actually told someone that we was going to be getting on at 333. I got on a little bit earlier just to make sure that I had some mods in here, but that's a great catch. Perfect place to start. So again, before we get started, I want to do that breathing activity wherever you are. If you have some space to do so, relax yourself. One of the ways that I always can tell if I'm relaxed, I check the tension in my shoulders. Oftentimes in the past, before I really started doing this work, I would find myself with my shoulders always heightened, right? I would feel myself holding my shoulders up because I was always in this self-defense mode. So one of the first things you want to do when you're checking yourself to make sure that you're relaxed, drop your shoulders. Drop your shoulders, relax your jaws, as Becky just said, right? That's the first thing you want to do. Drop your shoulders, relax your jaws. Sometimes it helps to kind of do the arm flailing. Just kind of drop your arms and relax. Pull into your stomach. Hold for a second. And you want to push all that air out. You want to suck your stomach in as you're pushing the air out. Inhale again. Again, focusing on that chakra area right at your waistline. If you're doing this right, you will start to feel the blood flow actually starting at the top of your head. You'll feel like a flowing motion flowing down your face, flowing down the side of your face, and flowing down your neck. That's when you know you're releasing that tension, you're centering yourself, and you're grounding yourself. So we're going to do this a little bit more, and I'm going to stop talking to allow you all to just focus. Focus on that waist abdomen area right below, right where your pubic hair starts to grow, well below your navel. That's where you want to imagine the air is going. You want to see your stomach inflate as you take in that air, not your chest. Your stomach should inflate first. And then when you're exhaling, you want to push that air out slowly, but push it all the way out by squeezing in on your stomach. So I'm going to be quiet now, and we're going to actually go through this to make sure we're actually grounding ourselves and relaxing as much as possible. So I usually like to do that for at least about 30 seconds or a lot more, depending on what type of day I'm having, depending on what exactly it is that I'm getting ready to do. But when you do that activity, and you know what's great about that activity, right? I noticed that my voice and even my body has changed right after that. Like my tone, a lot of that excitement that I initially had in starting the live, just in actually doing that activity, like I can tell within myself and even hearing myself that my tone has calmed down, it's slowed down a lot more. I feel a lot better in my mind, my head physically. I can feel a lot of that tension that has released. My shoulders are a lot more relaxed. That is the activity that I would recommend that each and every one of us do before you start your shadow work. If you have other activities that you do that actually works for you, I would recommend that you do that. But before and after, when we do these sessions, we're always going to do that activity because it works. I can even tell within myself how much I've calmed down from a lot of that initial excitement of starting the live, and that's some proof that it actually works. And I hope that each and every one of you feel better as well. So I have taken some notes that I'm going to use to kind of guide me through this and guide us through this. Let me get to my notes here, and then we will get started. All right, so we covered our breathing exercise. So briefly, I want to talk about what shadow work and why we're doing this, right? Especially when it comes to wound mapping, because wound mapping is actually looking back and figuring out what was the causes of your wounds. And one of the things that I want to be very clear about, wound mapping and shadow work is not about blaming. You're not doing this to find out who hurt you. You're not doing this to pinpoint who hurt you, if it was your parents or if it was the people that raised you, or if it was the people around you. That is not what shadow work is about. In fact, shadow work is not even just about finding out necessarily just what happened to you or what your wounds are. Shadow work is about healing and rewriting your subconscious so that your behavior reflects actions that are in your best long-term interest. It's not about blaming, because this particular activity, as far as wound mapping and in the way that the journal shapes it, really takes you back to places in your life where you may see people, or as you think and work through these activities, you may reflect back on people that were the people that harmed you, that were the people that did the things that caused that wound. Shadow work is not about finding that person and then saying, oh, they're the reason why. If you have comments, please do share your comments in here. This is an engagement part. If you guys have comments, do share your comments. I'll read some of the comments and I'll engage your comments. But so as we do this activity, you may re-trigger. And again, we're not going to do the activities because I believe you should do these activities by yourself. But I'm just going to go into some depth about the activities, and then I'm going to give you some tools for the reflection questions. But as you do the activity, you may reflect on people in your life, whether it be your parents or whether it be other people that have caused you harm or are at the root of your wounds. The point of this shadow work is not to just get there. The point is not even to just figure out what your wounds are. The point is to heal and then rewrite your subconscious mind so that you are living a healthier life, so that your behavior is more beneficial to your long-term best interest. So C. LaFleur said, just curious, but have you ever read the books or listened to the podcast by Gary John Bishop? I have not read Gary John Bishop, but I will definitely note that and check it out. All right, so the first activity we're going to be working on, which is the first activity in the journal once you get past all the introduction material, is the wound mapping activity. And if you have your journal, it's part 2, right? Shadow work activities is the first activity. I know I can flip the screen so you guys can read it, but if you have your journal, you should know what this is. So we're going into wound mapping. We're not going to do the activities here together. As I stated before, I'm just going to give you all some more insights into what these activities are for, how to do the activities, and then most importantly, I'm going to give you tools for the reflection questions. So there's 6 parts to the wound mapping section of the journal. Today, we're going to cover 2. One of the things that I personally have experienced about shadow work, it's not a speed thing. This isn't like your regular books where the goal is to read through the book and be done with the book. That's not what shadow work is about. Shadow work is about pacing yourself, being genuine with yourself, being compassionate with yourself, being honest with yourself, but also taking your time to work through the process. It's not a race. It's not something that you have to rush to complete. It's all about if you're getting from these activities the benefits that you're looking for. All right. So the wound mapping activity is really, and I'll read what the journal says, and then I'll kind of give you all some of the insight that I want to share. So the exercise is to identify your inner child wound based on the attributes listed on the next page. Abandonment, guilt, trust, and neglect are the 4 major kinds of inner child wounds. You may find one or more that aligns with your persona. Again, what you may find is that you may not find one of these wounds related to your childhood. I'll read the why in just a minute, K-Max. You may not find one of these wounds related to your childhood. But if you've experienced trauma in a relationship, even in your adulthood or your teenage years, you still may be functioning out of one of these wounds. And identifying and acknowledging where you are is one of the first parts of knowing why you need to heal that area, what exactly is it that you need to heal, and where you're healing from. So the why is, it hurts to be offended or harmed, especially at a young age. This is an exercise that allows you to pinpoint emotional wounds from your early childhood. These wounds are what causes certain behaviors and habitual thoughts that do not serve us. By identifying your inner child wound, you will hold more space for compassion towards your humanness and provide a healthy foundation to begin your shadow work journey. So that's the why. If you cannot identify exactly what that wound is within yourself, it's okay, right? Again, this is not a competition, but if you're honest with yourself, and if you have the journal, and if you don't have it yet, definitely get you a copy. When you get the journal, you'll find that the steps that are listed in the journal will help you discover what those things are, but it's also going to provide you some guidance on how to work through the healing process. And I'll admit, sometimes there's some activities in the journal where the reflection questions are asking you to provide yourself the answers necessary. And I feel like that's where this guide and these lives and my videos are really going to play a part, because a lot of times if you haven't done this work, or if you haven't been through this process, you may not have those answers for yourself. So I'm going to give some examples of what those answers should sound like so that you can work through it. A Northern California realtor says, abandonment wounds. I keep attracting my absent father and my emotionally immature mother in my life. That acknowledgement is amazing, because that's the first step. So the first thing that I recognized when I read through the wounds was, for me, is neglect wound. And I'll read what the attributes are. Struggles to let things go. I was that way for an extremely long time. Has low self-worth. I'll give you guys an example. About a little over 2 years ago, I lost my 16-year-old son, right? And I went into therapy shortly after that. Having gone back to work without any therapy, I was struggling, realized I needed therapy. And I was talking to my therapist, and I was telling him how, when I had my son, he was my reason to live. He was the reason to change my life. He was the reason to really do all the things that I did to turn my life around in the right direction at the time. I was 23 years old. And then I was telling him, after losing my son, my daughter was the reason I was holding on, and she was my reason for pushing forth and not giving up and not falling back into anything that was detrimental to my long-term well-being. And he kept looking at me really strange. And then I told him about my childhood, and I told him how a lot of negativity was spoken about me and spoken over my life, and how I was constantly told I'm not going to be nothing. I'm never going to be anything. And then he put it together and said to me, I'm glad you shared that bit of information, because I was wondering why it was that you never saw yourself enough of a reason to want to be more, but you always relied on somebody else. And as much work as I had done up until that point, I didn't realize that a lot of that low self-worth from those words that were spoken over my life was still lingering in my psyche. And those are the types of things, those are the very subtle things. Thank you, Northern California realtor. I appreciate that. Those are the really subtle things and the really subtle ways that wound comes up in your life and still plays a part in your psyche, your behavior, the way you perceive yourself, and the way that you go about life. Right. But I'll continue reading some of the attributes of the neglect wound. Then I'll read the attributes of the other 3 wounds that are listed here. And then we're going to go into the activity, and we'll cover the activity a little bit. But the most important thing that I'm going to cover are the reflection questions, because I want to give you all the tools that after you do the activity on your own, I don't recommend you do it here while we're all here, because it's going to require you to do some really deep reflection. And I don't think that can really happen in this space. But if we give you the tools before every section, then when you actually go and do the activity on your own, you have the tools to help you work through it and to give you some of the answers that you need. So I'll finish reading some of the attributes of the neglect wound, which is where my wound is seated. Struggling to let things go, has low self-worth, gets angry easily. I was an angry child growing up, and even an angry teenager and an angry young adult. So I can relate to the neglect wound part, because that's really where my childhood wound was seated. Struggles to say no, repress emotions, fears being vulnerable, normally attracts people who don't appreciate them or make them feel seen. Let's go over the attributes of the abandonment wounds. Feels left out, fears being left, hates being alone, codependent, threatens to leave, normally attracts emotionally unavailable people. Ready for lace. Thank you. This is my life work, right? Some people, we all have a purpose that serves the collective. I found my purpose in serving the collective is really that process of healing and having insight, because a lot of my gift is the ability to read people. So I can go into a room with a person, and if I'll go over that one more time for you, Daresh. I'll go into a room with a group of people and I can read the energy that comes off of a person. And a lot of times what I get insight to is the energy of hurt, which allows me to know the right thing to say to people whenever I'm engaging them in the process of healing or just pouring life into people or pouring positivity into people. So we all have a gift that serves the collective. I'm just fulfilling my gift in the ways, and this is one of the ways that I'm fulfilling it. So abandonment wounds: feels left out, fears being left, hates being alone, codependent, threatens to leave, and normally attracts emotionally unavailable people. As I read the rest of these, we'll notice a trend, and I'm going to highlight that trend before we move forward. So let's cover the guilt wounds. Feels sorry or bad, doesn't like to ask for things, use guilt to manipulate, is afraid to set boundaries, normally attracts people who makes them feel guilty. I'll read the guilt wounds again. Feels sorry or bad, doesn't like to ask for things, uses guilt to manipulate, is afraid to set boundaries, normally attracts people who make them feel guilty. The next one is the trust wound. Is afraid to be hurt, and I think most of us have a bit of this, especially if your wound is rooted in your childhood. Trust is going to be an issue for you. So the trust wounds. I just learned I have pieces of several wounds. Absolutely, Becky. And like I said, we all do, right? There's some of these that you're going to feel based on whatever your circumstances were in your upbringing. And again, this is not about blaming or finding out just why I am the way that I am. Shadow work is about understanding why you are the way you are, then healing and rewriting your subconscious so that your behavior serves your own long-term best interest. And when your behavior serves your long-term best interest, it serves the interest of the people that are connected to you, the people in your relationships and the people in your families. So trust wounds: is afraid to be hurt, doesn't trust themselves, finds ways to not trust people. How many of us will find a way, no matter what a person is doing, and find a reason to not trust them because we have that trust wound? Feels insecure and needs lots of external validation. And all of these attributes under a certain wound may not all relate to you, but the ones that do, you need to acknowledge, because you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. And that's a large part of shadow work, is being honest enough with yourself, which is why I suggest doing the activities in your own private time. But you have to be honest enough with yourself in order to heal from the thing. Feels insecure and needs lots of external validation, doesn't feel safe, normally attracts people who don't feel safe. And then neglect wound, which was the first one that I read because that's the one that resonates with me the most. I'll read that again. Struggles to let things go, has low self-worth, gets angry easily, struggles to say no, represses emotions, fears being vulnerable, normally attracts people who don't appreciate them or make them feel seen. When I read through these, the one thing that was consistent, and it hit me in a very particular way, because I look back on my life and I saw this. The last attribute of every one of these wounds is that you attract someone who is exactly a reflection of the wound. You end up attracting people who are the exact reflection of the very thing that you were wounded about or wounded from. I'm going to read through these just one more time, and then we'll kind of touch on wrapping this part up, and then we'll go into the next activity. So the abandonment wounds. You feel left out. You fear being left. You hate being alone. You feel left out. You fear being left. You hate being alone. You're codependent, threatens to leave, normally attracts emotionally unavailable people. Guilt wound, feels sorry or bad, doesn't like to ask for things, uses guilt to manipulate, is afraid to set boundaries, normally attracts people who make you feel guilty. Trust wound, is afraid to be hurt, doesn't trust themselves, find ways to not trust people, feels insecure and needs lots of external validation, doesn't feel safe, normally attracts people who don't feel safe. Neglect wound, struggles to let things go, has low self-worth, gets angry easily, struggles to say no, represses emotions, fears being vulnerable, normally attracts people who don't appreciate them or make them feel seen. Again, the one thing that stood out to this for me is that when we don't heal, we end up attracting to ourselves the very thing or the very people that are like the spaces where we're wounded. And that's why healing and actually doing this shadow work is important for you, because we find ourselves in the very same cycle in life, meeting the very same people. And until we recognize that a lot of these people that we're attracting to ourselves are a reflection of our subconscious and what we're actually releasing out to the world, we won't break that cycle. So again, if you don't have your journal, I believe Becky said, because I can't see it on my screen, there's a shopping cart right here. Definitely get your journal. We'll be doing these every Sunday as a part of my series on, the series is normally called Sunday Serving Food for Thought. We would usually do some type of spiritual teaching or delve into something spiritual. And I believe that this is a part of the same concept. So for the next few weeks on Sundays, as a part of my Sunday Serving Food for Thought series, we'll be covering the different steps within the Shadow Work Journal. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, click the shopping cart over here. Go get you one. I'll admit, plenty of people have gotten their copies. I'm really doing this as a part of all of us walking through this together, because baby girl Blue Eyes, over the last 5 days, the journal becomes available for like 2 hours, and then it sells out within those 2 hours. So I try to post a video whenever it becomes available to let everybody know, like, hey, the journal is available. Get your copy now before it sells out. But I'm suspecting it'll be back available tomorrow sometimes for a few hours. Get your copy when it becomes available, because it's going to sell out in like an hour or two. It's been doing that for the last 5 days. It's a high commodity product. It's well worth it. People are on it. So yeah. And also, just in full transparency, you can get the journal on Amazon. You can go straight to Amazon. You can get the journal on Amazon, or you can go to my website, follow the link there. But you can get the journal on Amazon. Supporting here through TikTok is great, but if it's sold out here and you want to get your journal so you can join us on this journey, definitely go to Amazon. I'm all about you getting the journal in your hands so we can start this healing journey together. So again, about these wounds, identifying and acknowledging your wound is the first step to healing. You cannot heal that which you won't recognize within yourself. All right, so let me run through these notes to make sure I cover everything. So as you're doing this wound mapping, right, and the next activity is, these are the fill in the blank activities. These are the ones that I was talking about. These activities can be a little challenging. What I would recommend is, of course, doing this in a private space where you're by yourself, but slowing down. Because when I went through these activities, for some of these are areas in my life that I've already done some work in. So it took me some time to really try to revisit those emotions. And I wanted to make sure that I went through the journal completely before I actually started doing these so that I would have a real point of reference to share with everybody. Some of these activities, it took me a little bit of time to really find that space within myself again. But what I realized was two things happened to me when I read it. So I'm gonna go through the first fill in the blank activity. And as I read through it, the thing that was happening to me is going to happen to some of you, and then I'll revisit it after I read it, right? So essentially the activity is there's a sentence that starts and then there's a blank. The idea is for you to fill in the blank honestly of whatever that thought or that emotion that derives when you start reading that sentence. So I'll read them and then I'll go through what my experience was when I first started doing the activities. So the first one is, I always feel like I'm the blank one. Blank is how I manage to escape. Blank brings me peace. I am so tired of blank and blank, but excited about blank and blank. I want to try to blank so that I can finally blank. For some reason, I always end up blank. I deserve blank and blank. So what happened to me when I first started reading these, words instantly popped in my mind. What I did was I wrote those words that came to me first. I wrote them down first without even giving it any thought. The first word that came to my mind, I wrote down. Once I finished filling out the entire fill in the blank activity, I then went back and I read each one again, and then I gave it some more thought. What happened with me is, as I did that, some of those answers changed, and I want to talk about why, because this is important in understanding how to do shadow work. There's your subconscious mind, and then there's your conscious mind, right? And somewhere here, okay. Your conscious mind is your logic, your filter, your analytical mind, your movement, your decision making, your short-term memory, your willpower, and your critical thinking. So when you start to read the fill in the blank activities, most of the time, the initial answer that's going to come to you is going to come from your conscious mind, because you're aware that you're reading something, and consciously it's almost like in a conversation, you're automatically speaking, right? So a lot of that is coming out of your conscious mind. But if you notice in conversations where you're emotionally triggered, normally what comes out is not what you would have said if you were calm, cool, and collective. Because when you're triggered, the information comes out of your subconscious mind, which is a deeper, more honest part of yourself. Your subconscious mind is your habits and your patterns, your emotions, protection. Your subconscious mind controls your bodily functions, your belief, your desires, blaming, denying, and lying, attachment to things, thoughts, and feelings. So when you read it for the second time, when you're doing the fill in the blank activity and you actually slow down, what I would recommend that you do is allow yourself to just fall in and be honest with what comes out. Because initially when you read it, your conscious mind is going to give you the answer that just naturally. But what I found in doing the activities were, whatever came to my mind the first time, I wrote that down because I recognized these are my conscious thoughts. When I went back to do it, I slowed down. I allowed myself to go in without fear, without any type of hesitation. And then whatever answer came up, I wrote that as well. And what I found was there were times where those two answers were very similar. The second answer was just a little more deeper and more honest. The first one was more surface. And then there were actual blanks where I realized my first answer was dishonest. The first thing that I said the first time when I just read it and wrote down those initial answers, when I went back the second time and just allowed myself to take a deep breath, go within myself, and then find the true honest answer, I recognized the second answer that I wrote was more true to what I really felt and what I was really experiencing than that first. Use a pencil. Good recommendation, Becky. Use a pencil. But I realized that second answer, when I allowed myself to go within, I'll say this to you, and this is also very important. Do not be afraid of what comes out when you're doing these activities. Do not be afraid to say what you actually know is inside of you. There were a few of these activities that I did when I would slow down and allow myself to go within. I hesitated to write the answer that I knew I felt. Don't do that. Because the key to doing shadow work is honesty with yourself. You're not doing this for anybody else. You're not doing this journal for somebody to read and criticize you. You're doing this as a part of your healing journey. You have to be absolutely honest with yourself. Acknowledgement is the first part. If you cannot acknowledge the thing that is within your subconscious that is driving your behavior and your patterns, then you are not going to be able to work through this journal honestly to help you get to a healed place and to actually change that behavior, those patterns, those thought patterns that are detrimental to our long-term best interest. So as you're doing the fill in the blank activities, here's what I recommend you do. When you first start reading it, write down the first answer that comes to your mind until you complete the entire paragraph. Once you've completed the paragraph, go back and then read it slowly. Take your time. And every time you get to a blank, take a deep breath. If you need to close your eyes, and the real emotion and the real feeling that needs to go into that space will come up. Write it down. Do not be afraid of what those emotions are, because what did we say shadow work was in the previous videos? Dealing with those repressed emotions. We're actually doing the wound mapping. We're on part 1 of the fill in the blank activity. So remember, what we're trying to deal with are repressed emotions. And if you're not going to be honest, all you're doing is you're allowing that emotion to come up. And then out of fear of that emotion, you're going to repress it again. That's the whole point of doing these activities and doing this work, is to bring up those emotions and address them. Because just because we've repressed these emotions does not mean they've gone away, right? And one of the ways that your shadow shows itself is when you're triggered, when you're upset. And if you notice, the behavior that comes out of you that does not serve your long-term best interest when you're triggered, it's coming from those repressed emotions. So doing these activities, it can be challenging. Some of the things that are going to come up are not going to be pretty, but remember, always show yourself compassion, right? The thing that I said earlier, shadow work is not about blaming. It's not about blaming the person that hurt you. And it's certainly not about blaming yourself. But you can't repress those emotions while you're doing this, or else you're only going to hinder your own progress. I'm scared of the dark place this book is going to have in me. So 2 things. The book is not going to have a dark place in you, but it will expose some dark places in you. And here's the way you need to think about that. If it's being exposed, it's giving you an opportunity to address and heal that place. But the fact that you know the book may expose something that's in you is evident that it's there. And here's the thing. Here's why we're afraid. Our conscious mind is afraid because we don't know how we're going to deal with it. But the reality is this. It's in you and it comes out of you. It comes out of you regularly. When you're doing some of these subconscious things that is harmful to yourself, that's harmful to other people, when you're triggered, all of these dark spaces, that's a legitimate concern, right? Because a lot of people have expressed that to me. Like, I don't know I don't know how I feel about the things that are going to come up by going through this book. That's partially why we're doing this together, so that we can be that support system to one another. The other part is be very aware that just because you're not consciously addressing those things do not mean they're not coming up. They're just coming up in times and in ways that are harmful to you and harmful to the people around you. Coming right out of your subconscious into your behavior, into your activities, coming out of your subconscious into the thoughts that torment some of us, into the behavior that we keep going over and over and doing over and over again. So the part of why we have to do this work, or why we're choosing to do this work, is we know it's there, right? We know it's harboring there. The idea is by going through this step-by-step guide, we can pull those things up, address them, find a way to reframe some of those memories so that they're no longer hidden in dark areas, but they're healed areas of who we are, and they're no longer impacting our behavior and our thoughts in a way that's harmful to our long-term best interest. But that's a very legitimate concern that many people have expressed of, I'm afraid of the dark areas that this thing is going to bring up in me. But I always say, are you more comfortable with knowing that those areas are there and unaddressed? Or are you willing to do the work necessary to pull those areas up, address them, expose them, love them, accept them, reframe the memories around them so that you can live a wholesome and more fruitful life? Many emotions show up as anger for me, not necessarily angry. Many emotions show up as anger for me, not necessarily angry. Give me a little more context, Ortiz. All right, so here's the part where I feel like these sessions are going to be most beneficial to everybody that has the journal. The reflection questions. When I read the reflection questions, because of all the work that I've been doing in just 20 years of going through this process without even a journal, without any guide, but having a strong spiritual experience early on in my life, and then challenging a lot of things in life, and then having gone through all the trauma that I went through, I was able to look at these reflection questions and know what I needed to do. But I recognized that the reflection questions for someone who's just getting into shadow work is a little blank because it doesn't give you the tools. So that's the area that I'm really going to focus in, to give you all the tools to actually apply to these reflection questions, so that after you're done with the fill in the blank activity, you have some tools to work through whatever was exposed in the activity. Guru, I'm glad you got your journal. We're working on the fill in the blank section of the wound mapping section of the journal, part 2. Ortiz, I think you responded. Yep. It's hard to discover what I'm feeling because anger is my main go-to emotion so many times, I believe is what you're trying to say. And what I would recommend, Ortiz, go back to the wound mapping part. I just noticed journal doesn't have numbered pages, but if you go back to the wound mapping part, Ortiz, find what part of this, and I can kind of tell you myself. The neglect part highlights gets angry easily. The neglect part is where I'm at. Thank you to whoever just went ahead and ordered your copy of the journal. That's awesome. Shopping cart is right there on the screen. Definitely get it. We're going to be doing these every single Sunday for the next few weeks until we get through the entire journal. If you don't have your copy of the journal, shopping cart is right on the screen. Order it. If you do have your copy, follow along. If you're waiting for your journal to get here, I'm going to upload these lives to my YouTube channel, and I'll have the information on my profile so you can actually follow the videos if you've missed it because you haven't received your journal. But Ortiz, so for me, that was something that I dealt with. I would become very angry. We'll try to do around 3:33 every Sunday. We'll try to do right around 3:33, go for about an hour or so, or at least cover the sections that I've prepared, notes and everything to cover. Yeah, Ron Ellis, listen, for the past 5 days, the journal has become available for maybe 2 hours, and then within a 2 hour span, it's sold out. So you can go to the link in my bio, go to my page and get it through the link there. And you can order yours today and get it and join us on this journey. But so Ortiz, so for me, that anger came out of that neglect wound for me, right? And I'll read some of the attributes of the neglect wound. Struggles to let things go. That was me for a long time. Like if I got angry or frustrated about something, it took me days to let it go. But through working through that healing process and really understanding how to own my own space and how to pull up, why was I so angry? What were the things that was sitting in my subconscious that was causing that? After working through a lot of that, now when something happens, I recognize what happened. I recognize how I feel about it. I delve into why I feel the way that I feel. I go into how do I feel about the person that was a part of what happened. And then once I've separated all of these things, I decide how I want to address each one. One, the emotion of it, I recognize that even though I feel this emotion, I don't have to be this emotion. I can be upset about it, but I don't have to sit in that anger and let that anger now dictate how my day is going to go, how I treat the people around me, how I talk to other people, what I feel for the rest of the day. Yes, what you did upset me. I felt angry about it. But after identifying how I feel, why I feel that way, how I feel towards the person that was a part of that interaction, I separate those things. The first thing that I put down is the emotion of it. I'm angry. Yes, I recognize I'm angry. Sit that down. Because if you don't sit the emotion down first, it will determine or dictate how you deal with every other part of this. Right? Feel it. Recognize that you feel it. Do the separation of it. Because the thing is, once you start to separate that emotion, you can now compartmentalize how to deal with each part of what you feel. But for me, it came out of my neglect wound. And I was easily angry. It was hard for me to let things go. And that I recognized that for a large part of my adult life, most of the decisions that I made that impacted my long-term decision making was made out of an emotion that I felt in the moment. But once I learned that skill, recognize how I feel, acknowledge it, delve into why I feel that way, right? What did they say to me to make that I feel this way? What did they do just now that is causing me to feel this way? How do I feel about them? Well, and that how do you feel about them can be simply an assessment of, all right, you are the reason I feel this way. This is what you did. Do I think of your actions in this situation as intentionally trying to harm me? This is a part of the how you feel about them, right? Assessing and breaking that down. Do I think what you did was intentionally trying to harm me? Did you do it without the intent to harm me, but I'm harmed? Did you do it with well intent, but I'm triggered because of something inside of me? Once I've assessed that, then I know how to move forward with that person. But one of the best things to do when dealing with anger is to break it down. Don't sit in it, break it down. Am I angry? Yes. Why exactly am I angry? All right. The way that they spoke to me just now angered me because it makes me feel like they don't respect me. Okay, I'm angry. The reason I'm angry is because the way that this person spoke to me makes me feel like they don't respect me. All right, I'm angry. Why am I angry? Is that anger really a reflection of what just happened? Or is it something inside of me that makes me feel that way? That goes right next to assessing them. Did they intend to anger me? Did they intend to disrespect me? Once you break down that feeling and that emotion, you can start addressing each part individually. And the first part you need to address is take the emotion, I'm angry, but I'm going to sit it down. You have the power to do that. We have the power to do that. It comes by practice. It's not going to happen once you set in your mind, okay, I'm going to start breaking down my emotions. It's not going to happen just like this, but it comes by practice. And the best thing that you can do is to be consistent. Be consistent. Every time you feel that emotion that has always overwhelmed you, do that process, because what you're doing is training your hard drive. So think of your subconscious as a hard drive that is in autoplay, right? When you get on your computer, so I'll tell you all later. When you get on your computer, and you start using your computer, there are things that are happening in your hard drive that are not being controlled by your actions. Think of your subconscious mind that way. In your subconscious mind, as you're going through your life and the conscious things that you're doing, there are things happening in your subconscious mind that is actually driving your actions, your behavior, your perception that you are not consciously aware of. So this idea of breaking down the emotions that overwhelm you is you programming your hard drive on how to process this information next time it comes up. Now, just like a computer, you have to do this a few times until the computer learns how to do that for you. But the best thing you can do is to be consistent. Every time you engage that emotion that overwhelms you, go through that process, break that emotion down, and then deal with each part of it separately. The most important part, take the emotion that is overwhelming you, sit that down, and then address the rest of it. All right. The reflection questions in part 1 of the womb mapping activities. The first question is, why am I sometimes seduced into a victim mentality? Let's do a little bit of exchange here. Let's do a little bit of back and forth. You can share for yourself, or you can share in general to give someone else some insight. Why am I sometimes seduced into a victim mentality? I want to hear what some of you all have to say, and then I'll go through some of the notes that I took. Again, this is the part that I think is going to be most beneficial to us doing the journal together, because some people may not know how to really grasp a good assessment of themselves just yet to answer these questions and to give themselves the tools that are necessary to make it past the fill in the blank activity. And I think that's what I'm really going to focus on. Not really us doing the activities or going through the step-by-step here together, but really working on these reflection questions and giving you all some insight and some tools to equip you on how to do the reflection questions so that you have some tools to work through the fill in the blank activity. But I want to hear some of you all's answers. Why am I sometimes seduced into a victim mentality? And if it's not for yourself, give me some ideas on why you think others that may be dealing with that may be seduced into a victim mentality. What do we got? We want our parent to soothe our wounds. That's beautiful. That's beautiful, because we were never coddled and cared for at those younger ages. We go back to those spaces whenever we're confronted with conflict or some type of pushback in whatever the situation is. That was a good answer. Because that's when you get attention, care, and it feels good to you, lack of self-soothing skills. Absolutely. And the other thing is too, right? Self-soothing skills is a coping mechanism. You have to develop them as an adult, right? But when I think of self-soothing, remember, and if you kind of think back, there are children that because they lack certain things as infants or toddlers, they develop certain behaviors. Like we call them tics. Right? Sometimes kids will do this, or they pull on their ear, or they bite their lip, or those little things that you see people do, those little tics, those come out of some type of neglect or something that wasn't provided. So you do these physical things to psychologically give yourself the sense of soothing because you're not receiving it from the places or the people that you think you're supposed to receive it from. But that's a good one, Becky. I like that. Because you don't necessarily have to take ownership. I like that too. Right? And there are cases where we sometimes put ourselves in the victim mentality because, watch this, we may have compromised ourselves with our own actions, right? And now, if I sit back and take a seat and see myself as the victim, I don't have to be accountable to compromising myself. One of the biggest things that you're going to have to learn in doing shadow work and self-healing is self-forgiveness. You have to learn to forgive yourself, because even after we came out of those early phases of our life and we've already now downloaded these behavior and these trauma responses in our hard drive, we perpetuate the things that keeps us in those bad situations. And the more we do those things without addressing them, we build up this record of compromising ourselves and letting ourselves down and putting ourselves in these horrible positions. And until we stop and start doing this work, when you start unfolding and undoing this work in your life, there are going to be so many points where you have to look at yourself and say, I forgive you. Because a lot of times your inner child, that hurt, needs you to forgive yourself. Because that wound is from your inner child, but the actions that you carried on as an adult to keep hurting yourself, to keep putting yourself in positions where you kept re-injuring that wound, you have to kind of make that connection between you and that inner child, and that forgiveness has to happen. Hold on, let me make sure I get everybody's comments, because I love some of these responses. I think that because I was a victim in my childhood, in a way, it's what that's one of my notes, Ortiz. That's one of my notes. It's what feels comfortable to us. Because you hit it right on. See, that's why we share that neglect wound. That's why we share that neglect wound, because you hit it right on the head. It's what feels comfortable to us, right? If you've been a victim before, oftentimes it sounds a way, but if you've been through it, you know that's your safe space. Rather than sometimes confronting your own behavior or confronting the thing that's happening to you, you fall back into that safe space of, I'll just take it. Or I'll just see myself in this space because that's where you're comfortable. Great answer, Ortiz. Excellent answer. Victim mentality is easier way to get some attention. Absolutely. Absolutely, right? So if part of your trauma or part of your wound is that neglect, right? And you've been neglected and you didn't get that attention, sometimes it's like if you look at some children that act up, right? I actually started a lot of this work with working with people and pouring life into people and working with people through healing. When I started at the age of about 19, I think it was like 2021, working in a before and after school program in a school. Because of my own childhood trauma, like I was able to relate to a lot of the little kids or the little boys that were acting up in the classrooms. So what happened after a period of time, the teachers would stick all these troubled little boys in the classroom with me and be like, go over there with that guy. He's great with kids. And I would sit there recognizing and relating to the pain that these young boys were feeling. And a lot of time they were acting out simply because of neglect. Simply because that was the only way for them to get the attention that they weren't getting at home, the attention that they weren't getting in their personal life. If I cut up, I know Miss Johnson is going to call my name and the rest of the class is going to look at me and I'm going to get some form of attention that I'm not getting in other areas of my life. Kim, that's an excellent answer. That is an excellent answer. Because it is a safe space where you don't have to face your responsibility for the outcome of, Bree Cooper Campbell, absolutely. Absolutely. And the important part to recognize in that is the responsibility for the outcome of the moment, but the responsibility for the outcome of our actions. Sometimes we go into that victim space as a means of avoiding the reoccurrent act that we are perpetuating in our own life, the situation that we keep putting ourselves in. Yes, it's because of that trauma, but at some point, which is this process that we're all going through together, we have to do the work to heal from that, and then being accountable for the many of times that we did that to ourselves by putting ourselves in those situations. Great answer, Bree Cooper. Yes, avoiding taking accountability. Absolutely. Northern California Realty. All right, I'm going to go into some of the notes that I may not have heard and cover some of the things that I wrote. So I wrote, because there's comfort in your pain. Sometimes we go into that victim space because due to our trauma and the way that we had to learn to deal with our trauma, pain became comfortable. So oftentimes we will pull ourselves into that victim space. It hits different, but if you've experienced it, you know. We pull ourselves into that victim space because that pain gives us comfort. That pain is familiar. That's what you're used to being. You're familiar with that pain. So sometimes we pull ourselves into that space because I'm comfortable here. I know how to deal with this space. I've been in this space for so long that this space is comfortable to me. Because we are sometimes triggered back to a place where we were the victims before. So sometimes in a situation where you're having a confrontation or a conflict with somebody, or you're being triggered in the moment, you pull yourself back into that victim space because you got triggered there. It reminded you of a place that you were before. It reminded you of a thing that happened to you before. So unknowingly, and this happens so much. If you've got your own trauma, if your trauma is different from somebody and you're in a conversation and you've done or said nothing to attack or offend, and that person pulls himself right into a victim space and nothing has been said or done to actually victimize them, that's a trauma response. They've been triggered by something, not that you specifically intended to do. Sometimes, depending on whatever that person's trauma is, it could be the tone of your voice. It could be words that you chose to use in that moment. Those words, that tone, that raising of your voice, that facial expression triggers them back to a place where they were the victim. So they pull right back into that space because in that moment, they don't know how to fight back. They don't know how to overcome. They don't know how to address whatever that conversation is in that moment. So they pull back to that victim space that conversation or that tone or that word or that facial expression triggered them back to. I also wrote, because we are too fearful to stand up for ourselves. Jessica said, this is exactly my struggle. Being triggered by something that pulls you back into that victim mentality, Jessica. I just had a flashback of where I've done exactly what you are explaining. And we all do it, right? And that's why we're here going through this journey together, right? Because this is a statement that I know to be true. If you haven't stopped to re-author your life, you are a walking outcome of other people's actions towards you. If you have not taken a moment to stop, assess, and then re-author your life, you are a walking outcome of other people's actions towards you. That's why this work is important. That's why healing is important. Because all of us, remember that hard drive that I talked about? That subconscious mind? It's before you had a sense of your full identity, information was already downloaded into your hard drive, into your subconscious. And that information of those early years of your life have more impact on who you are today than anything that you've learned in your adult years, unless what you've learned has been part of you reauthoring who you are. And that's why we're doing this, right? Because this is us taking charge. This is us taking back the realms. This is us taking back the pen and saying, I can assess the things that I do that don't serve me and my long-term best interest, and I want to change them. The way that you change them is tapping back into your hard drive, tapping back into your subconscious, and rewriting some of the programming that is dictating how you're behaving. But we all do that. Now, here's the important thing that I think is sometimes missing out of the journal, and that's why I definitely wanted to do this, is once we answer these questions, you're kind of left without a place to go. Like, okay, what do I do? Now, the next two questions kind of help you through that. So I want to go to the next two questions and we'll kind of do them the same way. I need to reauthor myself just about now. Mina, we all do, right? We all do. And I promise you, it doesn't matter who they are, no matter how successful they are in life. This is why success is not the measure of a healed person, because we know successful people, wealthy people still unalive themselves, right? That's why we know, like, this healing journey that we're on, that we're talking about, your status in life is not a measured on whether you're a healed person or not. So whatever your social status is, don't look at people that are, oh, they have everything in life, so they must be healed and whole. No, they're not, right? We all collectively, as everybody as a whole, we all have gone through something. Some people develop coping skills that hide that something very well. Some of us don't develop coping skills that hide it very well. But I promise you this, those things that are hidden in your hard drive will come up depending on the situation. And if you watch a lot of people, no matter where they are in their stage in life, at some point people lose it. Part of that losing it is you've been holding that thing together for so long, and it just takes the right situation, the right circumstance for you to. And that's where we have people doing the various things that are not beneficial to their long-term best interest, their short-term best interest, or them being alive in general, right? So the second part, my people-pleasing codependency is the reason I'm a Northern California realtor. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes those things in our hard drive will play to our benefit. I'll give you a great example. I'm a very, very driven person. Any situation you put me in, whether it be a job situation, whether it be any type of activity, I am driven to a point where I am determined to be successful. But you know what that comes out of? That comes out of being told all my life that I'd never be nothing, that I'd never achieve nothing, that I'll never be successful by the people that were supposed to be pouring life into me. Now, even though that trauma gave me a sense of drive that often puts me ahead of the crowd, I still recognize that I have to address that trauma, right? Because now that I have that drive is not going to go away, but I can still redo the reason that I'm driven, right? Or the reason that was at the core of it. Because that reason, even though it's given me an attribute that is beneficial to my success, there's still other things that comes out of that reason that are harmful to my long-term well-being. So I still have to do that work. But you're absolutely right. There are some attributes that we develop out of those traumatic experiences that do serve us in certain situations, but they also have a way of harming us in a lot of other ways, which is why we must address them. Childhood revenge. I like that. Even though I want to be in a relationship, I feel safer alone. Her Rose, Yeah, I've been there. And you know what, Her Rose? If you really commit yourself to a healing journey and really do the work and find out what's at the core of that, you'll find that it's probably trust issues. It's trust issues, right? And we were talking about the attributes of the different wounds, and trust wound is usually at the root of that type of behavior, where you want it, but you find yourself safer here because why? It's hard for you to trust people. So yeah, that probably comes out of a trust wound. Monica, good afternoon. People telling me I can't do it make me more competitive, actually. Yeah, me too. And it's not even people telling me I can't do it. It's just they told me I wasn't going to be nothing my entire childhood, and that just put in me a fire that everywhere I'm at, every situation I'm in, I'm driven. But I also know that that wound also produces negative attributes that I must address. So I can't just lean on the positive attributes and go, well, there's something good that comes out of it, so I'm not going to heal. Nah, I'm going to do the work because I know out of that wound also comes some negative attributes that do not serve my long-term best interest. Now, I feel you. And most of us go through that, but that's a trust wound where we find it difficult to trust people, or when we're in a relationship, we find reasons not to trust them. Let me go into this next question because I want to work through these reflection questions and get to the next session. We're only going to do 2 parts today. So let's complete this part, then we'll go to the next part. Being underestimated, me too, Northern California. Dodging the workbook and reading that book are great together. Doing the workbook and reading that book. Absolutely. All right. So the second question is, what systematic self-improvement techniques can I use to replace my victim mentality into a more empowering belief about myself or the situation? I want some feedback from you all on that, and then I'll read what I wrote. Not so much trust is people saying things that triggers. Her Rose, definitely join us on this journey. I think there are parts in the journal that you're going to find very useful to a lot of that. I've actually done a lot of personal work on the way that I engaged in relationships. And once I healed a lot of those places within myself, I'm able to make myself available to someone who genuinely is here for me. And that's important too, right? The people that you make yourself available to has to be genuinely there for you, but that's a process as well. But I'll read the question again. What systematic self-improvement techniques can I use to replace my victim mentality into a more empowering belief about myself or the situation? Basically, what systematic techniques can I use to replace that victim mindhood into an empowering belief about myself or the situation? Sunny Shine. The first question was, why am I sometimes seducing the victim mentality? We kind of discussed that in length a little bit already. And as far as the journey, this is about the shadow work journal. There should be a link right here on the page. I believe the journal is currently sold out. So for the last 5 days, the journal will be available on TikTok for like 2 hours, and then it sells out. So I'm suspecting by tomorrow morning, it'll be not tomorrow morning or sometime tomorrow, it'll be available again. But more than likely, it's going to sell out. There are other places that you can get it, but I just got a notification from TikTok that I can't really direct you all to those other places. But you can definitely visit my website. It's in my profile. And visit my website. The website is in my profile. But yeah, it was weird because I got a notification. It was like, warning, don't direct people to other blah, 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 blah. So I can't directly say it, but you can definitely visit my website and there's some information there. All right, are we answering the question? Amber says doing self-reflection. I like that. And to be aware of consequences, good or bad. OSM, I'm presuming you say, okay. Knowing that my decisions matter and to be aware of consequences, good or bad. Yeah, they definitely listening. And which was kind of weird to me. I didn't realize they actually monitor. But because I do have a product on here, it makes sense. Making yourself accountable. Stop and reevaluate what happened without the emotion. Becky, that's powerful. That's powerful. OSM said taking responsibility and accountability first. I love those. That responsibility and accountability part is definitely. Here's the thing about that, right? And I'll make sure I scroll down and read your comments. So keep commenting. And when we stop on a comment, I'll still make sure I get to the other comments. That accountability and responsibility part can be hard when a thing is being done that is either triggering your trauma, triggering you in general, or causing an emotional reaction. The way that I always approach accountability and responsibility, even in those situations, is I look at it as a sense of empowering, which is what the question asks, right? What systematic self-improving techniques can I use to replace my victim mentality into a more empowering? And you ladies are hitting it right on the head, because the moment that I look at a situation from the perspective of responsibility and accountability, I just snatch the outcome out of the hand of whoever I'm engaged with. If you take the victim mentality, you surrender the outcome to somebody else. You surrender the outcome of how you're going to feel about it, how you emotionally feel about it, the physical outcome. You surrender everything when you take the victim mentality. The moment you start looking at it from a perspective of accountability and responsibility, now, however this turns out, I'm going to decide, because what I'm firstly doing is recognizing, how did I get here? What did I say? What did I do? And even if at the end of those three questions, there is nothing that I said, nothing that I did to put me here, guess what? I've now fully evaluated the situation to recognize that it's now on me to remove myself, to address it appropriately, and to move in a way that is going to serve my long-term best interest. So you all hit it right on the head. That accountability and responsibility piece is not just about self-blaming, right? Because sometimes when we hear accountability and responsibility, we think I have to take responsibility, as in this happened because of something that I did. Not necessarily. But what it does ask you to do is do that assessment first. Was it something I did? Was it something I said? Am I here because of my own actions? If I do that assessment and I find points where I did do something, I did say something, okay, I can move appropriately knowing how I got myself here, and it still empowers me to be the person to navigate myself out of it than to just fall back and be the victim. So you all hit that right on the head. Doing self-reflection, and that's a part of that responsibility and accountability conversation within yourself, doing some self-reflection. I missed a few comments. Let me scroll back up. Taking time to separate facts from feelings. A lot of times we fall into the victim mindset when we are triggered. And we talked about that earlier when I was talking to Ortiz about assessing when you get angry about something, right? Separating, when you break down that emotion into, am I angry, or whatever that emotion is? Yes. Why? Right? And that figuring, like, not just I'm angry because of this. No, like, what is it inside of me that is responding to the thing that angered me? Right? Breaking it down. Was it intentional? Did they intend to do this? Like, that's that part of separating the facts from just the feeling. Too often, we think we are our feelings. We literally think we are, like, whatever that emotion is, I have to be in it instead of it just being in me, which means I could just take it off, right? But you hit it right on the head, Realtor Tabitha, separating facts from feelings. And once you start doing that, you can take the feeling, sit it down, and assess the facts of the situation, which will help you navigate to a better place or a better outcome, or empower you to remove yourself or navigate yourself to the space that you need to be in so you're empowered in that situation. I tell myself to make mistakes. I get what you're saying, Ortiz. So this is, in a similar way, I say that it's okay to make mistakes, right? One of the things that came out of my trauma was, because I was so harshly criticized, I was harsh on myself. I would beat myself up so much about the most trivial things. And I mean super trivial, y'all. Like, I'm following directions on the phone. I miss a turn. And I'm railing myself mentally. Like, I'm kicking myself mentally. Devontae, what's going on, brother? I appreciate the love, brother. And I would be so harsh on myself because I was so harshly criticized as a child that I took on that onto myself. Here's the other part. I would harshly criticize the people around me the same way, whether it was my friends, my family, relationships. Like I was as harsh as they were on me. I was that harsh or harsher on myself, and that harsh and harsher on the people around me. And it wasn't until I really started to heal that area of myself that I started to give myself grace. So Ortiz, I definitely understand what you're saying, and that is critical and very important. Let me get a few more of these in as far as you all's responses, and then I'll read what I noted. I'm kind of scrolling slow because I don't want to miss any of the good comments because you all are kicking butt right now. Discernment, is this true for me or this situation? Sometimes, Southern Disney Mama, it could be that simple, right? Just assessing, wait, is this realistic for me? Like, does this, and really where that counts, Southern Disney Mama, is really when people say things about you or when people say things to you. One of the easiest ways that I've been able to just navigate through engaging with people sometimes is simply recognizing, and this is a part of healing, right? You get to a certain place where you've built and healed yourself in knowing who you are, that even on this app, like sometimes we engage in contentious conversations where we may have differences of opinion, and some people resort to name calling. I watch some people lose their minds because some stranger in the comments called them a name. And I'm like, yeah, that's trauma. Because in the moment that something doesn't apply to me, it no longer triggers me. But again, that's work, right? That comes from doing work. But you're absolutely right. Like, is this true for me or this situation? If you say something to me that doesn't resonate with me and is not true about me, it doesn't offend me. And I'll go a step further. Oftentimes, we're only offended by the thing that actually resonates with some truth in us. Oftentimes, we're offended by the thing that resonates with some truth in us, or we just haven't healed those soft spots in our life where people can still say things about us and it sends us from 1 to 1,000. But that was a good one. New to TikTok, what's your website? Check my bio. It is about getting it right. Remove yourself, address directly, and what was the last one? I don't know. What was the last one, Becky? All right, the journal's back in stock right now. Go get your copy. If you haven't gotten your copy, shopping cart on the page. Go grab one. I want to read a few more of you all's responses before I get into mine because these are really, really good. Do you know you won't injure someone else if not healed? That's fair. How do you know you won't injure someone else if not healed? Live life. That's sharp. That's sharp. And in my initial video when I first got the journal and completed it and decided that I wanted to be a part of getting this journal in more people's hands, I talked about how essentially hurt people hurt people. Like a lot of times that's what we're dealing with. Like hurt people. And whether they're consciously trying to hurt you or subconsciously hurting you, it's at the root of it most of the time. Hurt people hurt people. All right, let me get to sold out again. Listen, I've been in contact with the author, and yeah, get it when you can get it, and go to the website. The third one was the third question, and then I want to get you all's responses on this one. What kind of thinking do I need to adopt in order to step outside of my limiting beliefs and focus on what excites me? What kind of thinking do I need to adopt in order to step outside of my limiting beliefs? Hold on, I didn't give my responses to the second one, did I? All right, I'll go through my responses real quick before you guys start answering this one. I wrote, acknowledging vocally when we are being a victim. So scratch the last question I just read. I'm answering, what systematic self-improvement techniques can I use to replace my victim mentality into a more empowering belief about myself or the situation? I wrote, acknowledging vocally when we are being a victim. And I mean saying it, telling yourself in that moment that you see yourself drifting into that victim mode, call yourself out. I'm being a victim right now. This situation requires a different action out of me than how I'm responding. I am empowered to react to this situation differently than just simply being the victim here. You have three creative faculties in that you're built with: your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Oftentimes, the one that we use to the most detriment to ourselves is our words. Use your words to recognize, like when you speak a thing, especially in a situation where you're doing the thing unconsciously or subconsciously, or you're doing the thing in a way that you feel like you can't control it, speak it. Acknowledge it vocally that you're doing it. And then the second thing I wrote was, speak vocally the action or mindset that we desire to display in the moment. So call yourself out, right? When you find yourself being a victim in a situation, call yourself out. You're being a victim right now. This situation requires another action out of you than being a victim. You do not have to be the victim in this circumstance. The second thing, speak the action or the outcome that you desire. You need to actually stand up for yourself in this moment, or you need to be accountable and responsible to the role that you may have played to have you in this situation. Vocalize it. When your mind, I'll go through those three creative faculties again. Your mind, your words, and your actions. These three things have a correlation and a connection. Watch this. This is powerful stuff. Watch this. When your thoughts are not aligned with your own best interest, there is a tool that you have that you can beat those thoughts. What's that tool? Somebody put it in the comments. When your thoughts do not align with your own long-term best interest, there is a tool that you can use to beat those thoughts. What is that tool? Your words. Your words first. Your words, right? When your thoughts, and sometimes that programming, that hard drive is in autopilot. It's just going. Those thoughts are just going. I dealt with that for a really long time, where even when I would try to sleep, like there are just certain thoughts that I couldn't stop. Your words are the first step to redirect your thoughts. When your thoughts are going in a direction, that do not serve you, use your words. Prayer. What is prayer? Because if your thoughts are over here, you can't just pray in your mind. You vocalize exactly what it is that you desire from that situation. We don't use the power of our verbal faculty often enough. Very, very powerful. So first thing I wrote was, call yourself out when you're being a victim. Secondly, speak the action or the desire that is necessary in that situation. So whether it's, I need to be accountable right now, be accountable and speak that to yourself. Whether it's, I need to speak up for myself, say that to yourself, verbalize it, actually use the words, let them come out of your mouth. Life and death is where? In the power of the tongue. Use your words. That is the first weapon or tool that you have to correct your thoughts. And then I wrote, display the actions we desire to protect ourselves. What did I just tell you? The three faculties, your thoughts, your words, and your actions. So once you speak that thing that you need to do it. If it's accountability, do that accountability. If it's standing up for yourself, do it. Speak up for yourself. But those are the three creative faculties: your thoughts, your words, and your actions. In the process of rewriting your subconscious mind, you have to know which one of those faculties you need to apply in the moment for you to actually get the outcome that you desire. And then lastly, I got one more that I wrote. Remove yourselves from people or situations that are called that make us feel like victims. Remove yourself from people or situations that make you feel like a victim. So if you find yourself constantly in a state where you're around a person and they're doing a thing, saying a thing that's causing you to keep falling back into that space, a lot of times people say, well, if you're healed, you won't be triggered. That's true, right? But if I'm in the process of healing, or if I'm in the process of working on a thing, I'm not going to keep putting myself in situations or putting myself around people that are hindering me from making that progress. It's like training to be a boxer, and you just started the training, but we keep putting you in the ring with Mike Tyson. You're probably not going to make it through that training process very well, right? So as you're in your process of healing and you keep finding yourself around a certain person or in a certain group of people or in situations that keep making you feel like you're the victim or keep putting you in that state, even though you're fighting and you're healing through it, remove yourself, right? Because you're not going to heal under that type of circumstance. You're not going to heal around those type of people because they're going to keep re-triggering that wound. It's like putting a Band-Aid on something and then keep going to the place that the injury happened and keep doing the same thing that caused the initial injury. You're not going to heal. You need to remove yourself from those situations and do that work. And even sometimes after you've done the work, you don't need to go test how healed you are by putting yourself around somebody that was causing your pain or your trauma in the first place. That's not a necessity. That's not a necessity for you. You don't have to do that, right? Do the work for you. Don't do the work to prove nothing to nobody else. Healing is about you finding a place where you are whole and you're doing things and you're exhibiting behaviors that serve your long-term best interests. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. All right, so now we can move on to the third question. Can you provide guidance about this and work just quit? It takes a little more than that, right? Because there are more nuances if you're having this experience at work, but there are a lot of strategies that you can employ or you can use in the workplace to defend yourself from that. But it's a little more nuanced than that. Send me a message and maybe we can dig into that a little bit more. All right, so here's the third question in part one. What kind of thinking do I need to adopt in order to step outside of my limiting beliefs and focus on what excites me? I'll read that again. What kind of thinking do I need to adopt in order to step outside of my limiting beliefs and focus on what excites me? So it looks like we're only going to be able to cover part one today, and that's fine because like I said at the very beginning, we're not going to rush through this. At least I'm not, right? When I did the journal, I didn't rush through it. I took my time because this work is not about how fast you can do it. It's about how effective you are at doing it. But so let's go through that last question, and then I'll take some general questions from everybody, and then we'll try to wrap it up. That I am worthy of healing affirmations to build self-worth. I love that, Disney Mama. That's good. That's good. Positive state of mind. I love that. I'll read the question again. What kind of thinking do I need to adopt in order to step outside of my limiting beliefs and focus on what excites me? More affirming thoughts? Absolutely. Right? Using those creative faculties, right? If your thoughts aren't working the way you need them to, you start using this one. Start speaking. We do not understand the power of our words. You can reprogram your subconscious mind by speaking a thing, especially every time a situation that's related to that thing happens. Letting go of ego. Ooh, absolutely. And I believe the book covers ego a little bit more, so we'll get into that in a later session. Move a muscle, change of thought. I like that. Surrounding yourself with who genuinely love you, I think is what you're trying to say, California Realtor. Surrounding yourself with people who genuinely love you. Trust myself and my gut, positive affirmations. Absolutely. Taking accountability. Absolutely. I want to read a few more of you all's responses before I go into what I wrote. Understand you are what's keeping you stagnant. That's powerful. Understand you are what's keeping you stagnant. You know why that's powerful, Ms. Rhea? And we talked about this a few minutes ago, because that's accountability. And for whatever reason, people treat accountability like sometimes it's a negative thing or whatever, right? Accountability is one of the most empowering things that you can do in any situation. Because once you do an accurate assessment of your own accountability, you're only left with the truth of what you have done to put yourself in a situation, which means you can stop repeating that action, or you're left with the truth of what is being done to you so you can accurately assess it and then move accordingly. Thank you, Ms. Jessica. Remind yourself you are safe, letting go of fear. I can do a whole live about how fear is not only the most handicapping thing that you can hold on to, but fear is actually being pumped and fed into us every single day, consciously, by a certain, we could talk about that. But we are being put in a state of fear every single day. It's the way that you control people. It's the way that society is controlled. It's intentionally being driven. Fear is intentionally put into every part of society to simply put people in a state where they can be easily controlled. And it's intentional. It's not like, oh, we're just afraid. No, we're intentionally being fed fear because fear is crippling and it makes you easier to control. So absolutely, Bree Cooper, you hit that right on the head. Keep a thought journal. Write down what you were told and how you. I like that. Game planning. I like that, Gabby. Game planning, right? You may not be able to come back in the moment, but you write down what you were told, how you felt, and a more appropriate way to respond. You can get a better outcome. I like that. Free to be me. You're absolutely right. Not just them. Like it's prevalent. It's prevalent in a lot of places. Please do, girl, dad. We need to talk about fear. I'll definitely put a live together about fear. Fear is so deep. Fear is on all levels, like especially on the spiritual level. Fear is a means of also. I'll say this. Fear is the way that you are stripped of all of the power that you are endowed with by your creator. It's that deep. Fear is the only way that you are stripped of all of the power that you are endowed with by your creator. In the state of fear, is the only way that any type of entity can have any type of control over you, is when you are in a state of fear. Otherwise, you are endowed with so much power from your creator that nothing, no other type of life force, no other vibration has power over you unless you are in a state of fear. But similar conversation, but a little bit different. Embrace solitude and use it for personal development. I like that. And we talked about earlier, the attributes of your wounds. Being afraid to be alone is one of the attributes of, I believe it is the abandonment wound. Hates being alone. That's a part of the abandonment wound. And some of us don't like it because it triggers some of those early experiences that we had. But I totally agree with you. Embrace solitude and use it for personal development. But don't use solitude as a means of hiding from facing what you are afraid of. But I agree with you. That's why when you are healing and working on self, television and certain music is not as appealing. Absolutely. Like fear is you're consciously and intentionally being fed fear every single day to keep your frequency. Come on, y'all, listen, we're not going to have that conversation. Y'all stop it. Thank you for doing this. I know I needed you. I'm sure others do too. Hey, we're going to do this together. We're going to do this together. And together we're going to get through this journal. We're going to get through this journey together. And I definitely want to hear all the testimonies after we work through it. The work, the journey, the healing, it has become priority. I fast from secular influence. I love it. All right, so I'm going to read my responses. Yes, please, and live on fear. All right. I think that'll definitely be, we can do one of those probably during the week. I'm going to reserve the next few Sundays just for the journal. But we can definitely do a live on fear at some point this week coming up when I get some time. I don't fit in. I thought it was me. Now, most of us, not only do we not fit in, but we're not supposed to fit in, right? We're all uniquely made for a reason because we all have a unique purpose that serves the whole. The idea of us having to fit in is it's a part of this structure of people being tools for what other people want to use you for, instead of people being uniquely designed and made to serve the collective as we are supposed to. So what I wrote for the third question of what kind of thinking do I need to adopt in order to step outside of my limiting beliefs and focus on what excites me? Compassion and self-love. No matter what situation you're dealing with, I don't care if even when you're doing your accountability and responsibility part and you recognize the things that you've done that has been contributing to the situation that you may be in, I need you to have more compassion and self-love for you than anyone else can at all times. You must exhibit an overwhelming amount of compassion for yourself. You have to. You deserve it. And you can't expect anyone else to have more compassion for you than you do. And I'll tell you what that actually connects to when it comes to your relationships. The level of compassion that you have for yourself is the level of compassion that you're going to be able to show to anyone else. If you don't have compassion for you, you are limited as to how much compassion you can show anybody else. Self-love and compassion has to be your foundation, especially when you're doing this type of work, because there are things that are going to come up in the process of doing shadow work and working through the shadow work journal that you're going to see patterns in your own behavior that you may feel a way about yourself, because you see that even though you had this traumatic experience, there were still points in your life where it was your behavior that may have kept repeating certain things. It was your behavior that created certain circumstances. Again, this is not about blaming yourself or blaming your parents or blaming whoever else was a part of the trauma that you've gone through. This is really about finding out what it is, healing from it, and then correcting the behaviors that are not serving your long-term best interest. But you have to exhibit more self-compassion for yourself than anyone else can, especially through a process like this. The second thing that I wrote was, do not harbor feelings of negativity after you've removed yourself from those people that are causing our limited beliefs. Even the people that may have caused your trauma. Because here's the thing, and I'll kind of wrap up here and then I'll open it up, answer some questions, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll go into part 2 next Sunday. The thing about harboring negativity is this. If you harbor negativity, put it like this. Look at negativity like a weighted ball, right? That you and I had an interaction. Something I did created this weighted ball between us. Boom. It's right here. It's on the floor. I may walk away from our interaction, not bothered or not even thinking about what I did. I'm gone. I left. In order for you to harbor the negativity towards the person, regardless what the situation is, what you have to do is pick up that weighted ball. Ms. Rhea, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate it. You tapped in. But in order for you to harbor negativity, you now have to pick up that weighted ball, put it on your shoulders, and leave our interaction and go back to your life with it. That's what harboring negativity looks like. Regardless what the situation is, I'll give you all a good example of a part of my journey. When I was 25, I think my son was like 2 years old at the time. I remember it dawned on me. I forget what I was doing. I think my son and I were having some type of interactions, and he did something that just let me know how vulnerable he was. And the thought clicked in my mind, this kid needs me more than I need him. And in that thought came the idea of, oh, I got to get my life together. So I started this process of figuring out, all right, why am I thinking the things that I'm thinking? Why am I living the way that I'm living? And at the root of a lot of that was my relationship with my dad. So as a part of my healing at 23, which was like 19, 18 years ago, I went to my dad and I had to express forgiveness to him. Dad, I forgive you. My father looked at me like, for what? Like, for what? Like, in his mind, he did everything a father was supposed to do. Like, he checked the boxes, right? I knew going into the conversation, I didn't need him to recognize what it was for. I didn't need him to accept the forgiveness. I wasn't doing it for him. I was taking that weighted ball of my childhood experiences off of my shoulder and dropping it between us where he left it. I didn't expect him to pick it up because I don't want him to carry that weight either. But I was getting it off of me. And that's what harboring negativity towards people, regardless what they've done to you, that's what that is. Not only have they done what they've done to you, but by you holding on to that negativity, you are now carrying the weight of their actions with you willingly. So whether it's you remove yourself from a situation, whether it's you remove yourself from people, whether you've forgiven people, whether you're still in the process of forgiving people, you can't heal if you're carrying a ball full of spikes, because that's what harboring negativity is. You can't heal if you're carrying a ball full of resentment. You can't heal if you're carrying a ball full of hatred. You can't heal if you're carrying a ball full of anger. You cannot heal. This process of healing, again, is not about finding blame. It's not about finding who hurt you. It's not about figuring out how you got hurt. It's about identifying what your points of hurts are, learning how to heal those points, and then reframing the memories, which is something that we're going to work on. Reframing the memories around certain actions in your life so that it's no longer causing patterns and behaviors that are detrimental to your own long-term best interests. But you can't do that. Nothing in this journal is going to help you if you have made it a solid decision in your mind that I'm not going to forgive so-and-so. Forgiveness is not for the person that's being forgiven. I'll say it again. Forgiveness is not for the person that's being forgiven. It's for the person that's extending the forgiveness. It's you taking the weight of whatever has been done to you and saying, hey, whatever our interaction was, you left a thing with me, a thing that I've carried for however long I've carried it. I no longer want it. I no longer need it here. And then I'm gone. So as we do this journal, the shadow work journal, like I said, I'll be knocking these out every Sunday. We're going to do a part every Sunday. Today we got through part 1. Took us about 2 hours, but it was very fulfilling. I hope you all got the experience that you want. I just want to leave you with that. As we do this work, if you haven't gotten to a place of healing, fine. That's what we're doing this for. But forgiveness is preliminary work. You cannot heal if you haven't forgiven whoever offended you, whoever hurt you, whoever harmed you, whoever caused your pain. And that in itself is a whole process, right? And this is what I'll do. Let's say Wednesday, and I'll update you all with a video post on my page. Let's say Jessica, you hit that thing right on your head. So Jessica, here's 2 parts of this, right? Forgiving other people is a preliminary measure to healing. Forgiving yourself is a part of healing. Forgiving other people is a preliminary measure to healing. Forgiving yourself is a part of the healing. So the forgiving yourself part, we're going to work through that. There's a lot of information in the journal about that. There's a lot of information that I'm definitely going to expand on that part, right? So we're going to get to that, right? So if you still feel like you haven't fully given yourself that grace of forgiveness, we'll work through that. But the part of forgiving whoever it is that is at the root of your trauma, that's preliminary work. Nothing in this journal is going to really resonate as long as you're holding on to any type of unforgiveness for someone that has caused you harm. So maybe what I'll do is maybe like this Wednesday or something, or someday this week, I'll do a live before Sunday on forgiveness, and we'll walk through it, because trust me, I've done a lot of forgiving in my life, in situations and times where someone looking at it from the outside would say this made no sense. But I understand I can't live a fruitful life while living in unforgiveness. And I got some experiences that you all will be like, wow, how did you not harbor resentment from that? Because I understand the power that unforgiveness limits you from. Right? So that's what we'll do. Before next Sunday, I'll do a live on forgiveness to kind of prepare everybody for the next Sunday session. And then at some point we'll do a live on fear. If not this week, maybe next week sometimes we'll do a live on fear. But all right, it's been 2 hours. I kind of set this for about an hour or two. So absolutely. I want to first, before I get out of here, I want to thank my moderator. Becky, thank you so much. Not only did you show up, but you did everything that you do so well. I greatly appreciate you, ma'am. I don't know why you're gifting when you're already the gift. I don't understand. Okay, the shoes are for Zori, not me. All right, cool. That makes a whole lot of sense. But I greatly appreciate you. You know, you show up and just do what you do effortlessly. Helping to promote, helping to highlight what needs to be highlighted, keeping me on point as far as the things that I need to make sure that I'm covering with everybody. Thank you so much. Jess, thank you. Thank you to everybody for joining. If you haven't gotten your journal yet, if the cart isn't up here somewhere, that means it's sold out. But like I said, over the last 5 days, I've observed that it becomes available for like 2 hours, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, and then it sells out that fast. So if you haven't gotten your journal, just be unaware. You can always come back to one of the videos on my page, click the link, order your journal when you have the opportunity. Bree Cooper, thank you for subscribing. You're tapped in. Once you have the opportunity, get the journal, because that's what we're going through. We're going to work through it. We're going to focus through it. We're going to get through it together. We're going to get through this healing journey together. And I will see you all sometime this week. So just keep it. So I just learned that you can actually set a notification for someone on TikTok. So I think there's a bell. If you go to my profile, there's a bell right there, so that if I post something, you'll be notified that I've posted something. Hit that. So when I post a video letting you guys know about the forgiveness live, you'll know when we'll be doing it. And then you'll get any updates as they come. 6 images. If it doesn't ship to your area, hit me up in the inbox. We'll see what we can do. I'll try to link up with the author to see where you are and see if there's any means of which you'll be able to order it. She's really cool. She's been really supportive of everything that I'm doing with the journal. So hit me up and we'll try to work it out. Again, I appreciate everybody for joining. I appreciate everybody for getting along on this healing journey. We're going to get through this together. Be honest, be pure, be real, and as always, love yourself like no one else can. See you all.